and I'd like to welcome everyone to the hearing today. This is the first time we've held planning committee using our hybrid model. So we have some people who will be participating electronically, and we're delighted to have all of you here with us today in person. So with that, I would like to officially declare that we have full quorum here today, and I would like to do the land acknowledgement today. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robinson-Huron Treaty No. 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred places, and take actions toward real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to walking the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for future generations. So with that, I have a motion for adoption of the agenda moved by Councillor Armour and seconded by Councillor Stone. It is recommended that the Planning Committee agenda dated June 15th, 2022 be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, we will move right along. So this is the official part, and I'm required to read a few paragraphs under the Planning Act. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the public portion of the meeting to consider applications to amend zoning bylaw 2008-66P pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act. The procedure of the public meeting will be as follows. A brief explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and any correspondence received to date will be given by staff. The applicant or their representative will be asked to provide any additional comments without repeating the information already outlined by staff. Any members of the public present, in person or electronically, will then be permitted to ask questions or provide comments respecting the applications. Committee will then have the opportunity to question the applicant, the planner, or anyone giving presentations. Once the public meeting is concluded, the input received and proposed amendments will be considered by committee and council. Any persons making representation are requested to first state their name and mailing address. Please note that the presentations are limited to 10 minutes. And if you are coming forward to speak to an application, we have a pad of paper right there to write your name and address. Please be informed that an appellant must provide an oral submission at the public meeting or written submission prior to the passage of the zoning bylaw. Otherwise, the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss the appeal. If you wish to be notified of the passage of a zoning bylaw, you must file either with the recording secretary or with the clerk a written request for notification prior to the passage of the proposed zoning bylaw. Each notice of complete application and public meeting included an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed amendment, and notice was required to be posted at the subject lands. Notice was therefore considered to have been provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and applicable sections of the Huntsville Official Plan. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our Manager of Planning, Richard Clark, to deal with Z01 2022 HTE 2849695 Ontario Inc., 100 Chaffee Township Road. Richard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 100 Chaffee Township Road. The property has an approximate area of 10 hectares with 64.5 meters of frontage on Chaffee Township Road. The lands are well vegetated aside from areas previously cleared around the existing dwelling. The lot is designated urban residential and is zoned Residential 1, Residential 2, Natural Resources, Conservation, and Open Space 2. The proposal before you is a rezoning to permit a minor amendment to a current approved draft plan of subdivision to increase the number of residential lots from 45 to 59 lots, so 14 new lots, and reconfigure the layout of internal subdivision roads. Application was also made to the district to amend the previous draft approved plan of subdivision, which is known as File S 2017-3, to include the above noted changes, or the previously noted changes. The proposed amendments increase the total number of residential lots to 59 overall, including lots with frontages ranging between 15 meters and 33.9 meters, and lot areas ranging between 467 meters squared to 2,874 meters squared. The subdivision road layout is also proposed to be reconfigured to a cul-de-sac road. And as before, the plan continues to propose a stormwater management block, which is located here, a parkland block, which is just north of it, a road reserve, and turning circles, which would be in this location. And it continues to be accessed off Chaffee Township Road. The zoning would reflect additional residential 2 zoned lots, and you can see where I'm pointing. Additional open space 2 lots, which is approximately here, and that would encompass an expanded open space block. The inclusion of a conservation zone to be applied along the natural heritage constraints along Gypsy Bill Creek, and that would be in this area. And a new lot layout and road configuration. Oh, and also new residential 1 exception zone lots, which would be in this area. And I apologize, I don't have the right figure for the zoning schedule. It's been revised. This would be residential 1 special, and this area here is conservation on the revised schedule. I believe the report has the proper schedule. The applicant updated many of the technical studies submitted in support of the previously approved draft plan of subdivision in support of their amendment proposal, and these included an EIS addendum prepared by Fry Ecological Services, an updated functional servicing report prepared by Pinestone Engineering, an updated traffic impact brief prepared by Tatham Engineering. Intensification is promoted within the Huntsville urban area, and this application provides additional lots to help achieve that objective. The official plan also contains policies about neighborhood designs within the urban area and includes policies about vegetation retention to enhance the natural appearance of the town, and policies about appropriately designed street patterns. In addition to the design policies for new neighborhoods in the urban residential designation, the OP policies respecting the design of local town roads generally apply. These policies indicate that the use of dead-end streets and cul-de-sacs are to be avoided, and a connected grid-type pattern is promoted wherever possible. Staff are suggesting that additional discussion is warranted with the developer regarding these policies. Given concerns relating to access by emergency vehicles, given the new cul-de-sac design, the applicant is encouraged to explore options to revise the plan to reduce the length of the cul-de-sac and restore a grid-type pattern where feasible. Conditions of approval will be recommended by staff to address various issues noted in the technical reports noted earlier relating to the implementation of town official plan policies and those recommendations of the technical reports. This is just a view of what the amended draft plan would look like with the 59 lots. And this is the existing approved draft plan of subdivision with 45 lots. Some site photos of the property just so that you can get an idea of the existing condition. There is 1 dwelling on the property. And these are some photos of the natural constraint area along the western property boundary. So I'll just turn off the presentation. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. Comments have been received and are appended to the report as Attachment 8, and additional comments were provided following publication of the agenda, and these were circulated to committee prior to today's meeting. The objection letters contained comments about environmental, traffic, and fire safety concerns. It should be noted that the zoning bylaw amendment has been brought forward for information only in order to consider these and any additional public comments and concerns heard at this meeting, and to address the need for further discussion representing an alternative road network option prior to a decision on this application being made. The next step after all matters are considered would be for staff to report back to this committee with our recommendations. And once a decision on the zoning bylaw amendment has been taken, staff would be in a position to advance comments to the district respecting the proposed amendment to the draft plan of subdivision. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Richard. At this point, I would call upon the applicant or their representative who are present in person or electronically to provide any additional comments.
As a reminder, if the applicant or their representative is present electronically, please use the raise hand button or press *9 to indicate that you would like to address committee. And Chair Alcock, I do see one hand raised. I'll now bring them into the meeting.
Okay.
Please note that during your transition, your video panel will be momentarily interrupted. Once you have been added to the meeting, your video will appear in the committee member panel. Please have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on before you begin speaking and to confirm your name and mailing address.
Isn't this different?
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Savas Radis of Plan Muskoka, PO Box 5384, Huntsville, Ontario, P1H 2K7. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. I didn't realize you guys were going with the hybrid approach. I probably would have been there in person if I didn't realize that. So I apologize if this makes it any more difficult. So I've sort of mulled around this one a little bit in terms of what I was going to say here today. As you know, we're here for information purposes only on this application. So there's no decision being made on it. And that is, fairly normal in terms of zoning bylaw amendment applications are not normally decided upon until the decision by the district on draft approval is granted first. And usually this is a condition of the approval. So, we would be looking to hold off a decision on this application until such time as a draft approval or the amendment to the draft approval is either granted or not. So, but I'm here to, I guess today, to just touch upon some of the elements of the staff report and some of the requests that have been made by staff, and hopefully shed some light on that and hear what the committee has to think. So as you've heard from Richard, the basis of making this application is to eventually implement an amendment to the existing 45 lot subdivision draft approval that exists on these lands. So really any comments from the town, any comments from staff really have to be based on what the impacts of a 59 lot subdivision is versus a 45 lot subdivision. Because whether or not the 59 lot subdivision the amendment is approved or not by the district, there will always be the ability for the landowners to revert back to or continue moving forward with 45 lot subdivision and fulfill those conditions of approval. So, I think Richard has explained in generality sort of what the changes really were that are being proposed to this plan. But just so you can understand, the original plan, the 45 lot plan, it had 45 lots, but those lots were not necessarily of minimal zoning frontage and area nature. They were designed sort of to have some slightly wider lots than the R1 zone would normally require, and less R2 lots as well. So really what we did was the landowners just looked at where could they gain a lot or two along a stretch of roadway if they were just to tighten up the frontages. So, for instance, if you had a stretch of roadway that had 21 meter lots on it, and the R1 standard is 18 meters, if you were to narrow all those lots to 18 meters, you would inevitably gain a lot or two on every stretch of road along this whole subdivision. So that's generally how the changes to this this application or this changes to this design were made, and that was applied for to the District of Muskoka. There was a pre-consultation meeting that was held between myself, the landowners, the District of Muskoka, and town staff before the amendment application was made to sort of flush out what sort of concerns there might be with this additional 14 lots that were being added density-wise. At that meeting, a lot of the studies that are now being requested by staff to implement this approval were not required. And I think there's some miscommunication in terms of where the notion that like some of these studies would be required came from. I know staff believe, and they said in their report, that the hydro-G and the slope stability assessment comes from the EIS, which stated that, you know, they recommended that would be undertaken as part of this approval of this application. I disagree. I have clarified with the author of the EIS why those statements were made. And basically she responded with, she made those statements because she was, you know, commenting on slope stability, and she was commenting on hydro-G water seepages that she noticed along the riverbank. And she wanted to make sure that it was understood that she was not saying this opinion or making these comments as, you know, like in imitating, let's say, a professional engineer that is an expert on the topic. That she just wanted to understand that she was making those comments as an ecologist and not as those qualified professionals. Now, you have to understand too that, for instance, development along that riverbank that's being proposed is already approved. There already is the ability for that draft approval of the 45 lot subdivision to be finalized. And in this case, the 45 lot subdivision approves 9 lots to be created along Gypsyville Creek. And there is no conservation zone being applied to those lots. There's only an NR zone along the bottom of the riverbank. And so the idea that we'd have to assess whether the slope is stable or not seems to be an issue that was not required the first time around when the subdivision was originally approved. And the subdivision was not approved too long ago in relative terms. It's about, I think, 4 years ago was the draft approval date of this subdivision. So these studies were not required the first time around. And inevitably, if these studies end up being the thing that the landowner decides, you know what, they're gonna not pursue this amendment any further, this subdivision and these lands will be developed. And they'll be developed essentially in the same area and encompassing the same area as what's being proposed here today. So I sort of struggle a little bit with the necessity of these additional studies if development is already permitted. Like, for instance, access. Comments have come up about from the fire department about like a singular access to the subdivision. Well, you know, the singular access to the subdivision is already draft approved for the 45 lot subdivision. So whether or not the 59 lots is approved or not, that singular access will remain that singular access. There is no ability otherwise to have a secondary access into the subdivision. So it really comes down to the measuring tool. Like we need to be looking at this from, are these 14 additional lots causing greater impacts to the surrounding neighborhood or to the road network? For instance, one of the things in the pre-consultation meeting that was flushed out was that we need to do a traffic impact study, and that was prepared. And that makes sense when you're adding additional density to a subdivision that's coming out at a certain intersection. You want to make sure that that intersection can handle that additional traffic, and that study determined that it does. And in terms of the EIS, they just wanted to make sure that, you know, instead of, because we're proposing 11 lots along the Gypsyville Creek area of the property, that those 11 lots versus 9 lots, which is already draft approved, those 2 additional lots would not have any negative impacts to the environment. And as you can probably imagine, the EIS came back and recommended that they would have no negative impact. That was peer reviewed as well. So we're at a situation here today where the developer is very frustrated. It's been a year since they made this application for this amendment. The District of Muskoka has deemed it a minor amendment, meaning that it doesn't have to go to district council for approval. Staff have the ability to approve that themselves at the district level. We're talking about 14 additional homes over a subdivision of already approved for 45 lots. It's a minor increase in density, but it's an important increase in density. It's 14 more homes that we could have on the same property with a very similar lot fabric and a very similar road network, as you've seen when Richard flipped through the two proposals in terms of the previous approval and the current design. The reality is that that one little section of roadway that's changed, the only reason why it's changed is because it's very steep in that area. And when the professional engineers that are going to be doing the design of the final roadway looked at it, they said, you know, they're going to do significant blasting and earth movement to get a municipal road through here that will, you know, comply to municipal standards. If you were to cut off that road at the top of the hill, then you would do a lot less grading, a lot less blasting, a lot less earth movement in order to make that road work. And that's the reason, the driving factor behind it. It's not because we want to disconnect a neighborhood or not for any other reason. And to be honest with you, you see cul-de-sacs all over the place. It's not, I don't believe it would be causing a concern that would be so great that we have to rethink whether or not we need to blast this hill out in order to put a road connection through there for, you know, a very short distance. So at this point in time, like I said, they're frustrated. They're strongly considering abandoning the 59 lot proposal, and it would be a shame if they did, because we lose the 14 lots and the 14 additional homes we could have out of these lands for essentially the same product that's already been draft approved. And reality is we also waste about a year's worth of time, you know, working up to this point in time. So I know we're not here to make a decision on this zoning bylaw amendment application, but you know, I'd like to hear what the committee has to think about this whole situation. I'm happy to answer your questions if you have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Savas. We are going to, all right, that's happening already. With that, I would ask if there are any members of the public present in person or electronically who would like to address committee on this application.
As a reminder, members of the public present electronically are asked to use the raise hand button or press *9 to indicate you would like to address committee.
Thanks for that, Jen. There is a member in the public here, and they're coming down. If you would, that would be appreciated, yes. Thank you. Or you could do it on your way out. I've just been reminded. That would be good. And you can also sit down. I'm remembering how to do all of this. This is really bizarre, I have to say. As I said, bear with us. It's really bear with the chair because she's a bit. I need, if you wouldn't mind sitting down, then you're close to the mic, and we need you to speak into our system. Thank you. I should have been clearer.
I'm not familiar with this.
No, that's fine. You're doing well. It's the chair. She's not doing very well.
Yes, I'm 94 Chaffee Township Road, so I am directly beside this property they're talking about as the road. And my question was, is there no other access to this property without that road? The road is very busy with dump trucks as it is, steady up and down that road. The road is very busy. Trucks going up High Street and so on and so forth. And I just think that it would be, even if after that road was used as one and then maybe another, but just to have that with all the action going on that road to start with seems like an awful lot to me.
Okay, thank you for that. We will have a response to that. Maybe we could, when we get to responses from committee.
Okay,
that would be
thank
great.
you.
Okay?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And you didn't state your name, just so we know.
Oh, Joanne Williams.
Joanne Williams. Thank you
Yes.
very much. And thank you for participating, Joanne. All right. And yes, sir, if you wouldn't mind coming down, please.
Hi, Jack Cardoso. I live at 86 Chaffee Township Road.
Yes.
And the issue I'm having is, my property is, the house that you see in the picture that was shown earlier, I'm directly behind it.
Okay.
And I'm having a lot of erosion because of that property and because of that house. Every time it rains, everything comes running into my backyard and it's eroding because I got an upper level. And I have pictures, but the issue is, I'd like to know when that house is gonna be removed because it's creating a lot of damage to my property.
Okay.
And what was also told is, even with all the townhouses that were built down that road, it is crazy, the speed, the unsafe for walking, for taking your dogs out, for anything. Everybody seems to go double the speed limit, sometimes flying down that road. Now, and then there's gonna be the apartments across, I forget the name of the road, directly across, you keep going.
Hi.
And the traffic is just becoming unbearable with the size of the road. And it's unsafe.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Jack. If you wouldn't mind writing your name and address, that's terrific. And I'll make the same comment. I know that every member of committee will note the concerns that you've raised, and I'm sure it will come up during our discussion. Okay?
But my property is being eroded, and I don't know who I should be talking to about that.
Okay.
That house needs to be torn down because when it rains, the roof is sloped into my property. Everything comes running down.
All right. We'll ask that question.
Okay.
All right? Okay, thank you. Are there any other members here? And Jen, were there any members electronically?
Chair Alcock, I see no hands raised.
Okay. All right, with that, then I will ask as committee noted, we don't have a motion before us today, but this would be the opportunity, questions from committee. I noticed Councillor Weeb before you.
I was pushing the button.
Were you, okay, but Councillor Weeb actually had his hand up.
Playing by
So-
the rules.
Oh, but you're next, followed by Councillor Fitzgerald. Okay.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. So I guess this question, as we heard earlier, there are a few concerns with the level of traffic and can this road ultimately support all the development that's occurring in that area? Because I know we've talked about making upgrades and making and widening, et cetera, but there are some constraints there that we've noted over the years. So I'd like some more clarity on that. I had the question as well, could there not be a second entrance to this development, sort of opposite Hibbard Lane in behind lots 12 and 13? Looking at the map, it seems like that might be the right course, but after hearing the planner, Mr. Veratis, it sounds like the grading and the creek is prohibitive. So I can set that one aside. And then my last question or comment would be, has the planner or the proponent considered if they're going to stay with the cul-de-sac layout, which if it means, as they say, that it would cause there's less disruption and less grading issues, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but I would suggest or wonder if they've got plans for perhaps a connecting walking trail so that all the residents within the subdivision could actually make a circular loop and walk their dogs and have that connectivity still in place. Because there's nothing sort of more, I find, more of a letdown than getting to a cul-de-sac and then you're trapped and you got to turn back around. So that's something to consider, and I'm just wondering if they've given thought to that.
Okay, with that, I'll perhaps turn it over to Mr. Clark for a beginning of a response with respect to the second entrance question, and perhaps followed by the traffic. Am I getting that?
Sure.
Okay.
So thank you, through you, Madam Chair. With respect to traffic, a traffic impact brief was prepared in support of this amendment. The traffic impact brief essentially, and I'll start, and if Mr. Veratis wants to add anything, we can make sure he can. But the traffic brief basically looked at the impact of 14 additional lots. The 45 lots were already draft approved, and therefore it can be assumed that the road, if it does need to be upgraded, it would be to accommodate that traffic in the future. So that's already on the books. So what we were looking at is the 14 new lots, and it concluded that there was going to be no capacity issues. The issues that it did identify were a potential for some misalignment at the intersection of, or where the new subdivision road would outlet onto Chaffey Township Road, and where Highview Road or Highview Drive currently exists. They would be, they wouldn't match up completely, so there would be an offset. So the traffic impact study did say that that's something that should be looked at, and hence there's a condition of approval recommended in relation to that. I think that was the primary conclusion of the traffic impact study. The 14 additional lots wasn't going to cause any additional problems. Chaffey Township Road is scheduled to be improved, and there would be sidewalks as part of that, subject to feasibility. But that is something that our operations department would still be working on regardless of whether this subdivision is approved or not. And then the other discussion point was about second access. And I think the idea was, why wouldn't there be possibility to have an access onto Muskoka Road 3, I think is what you were alluding to?
Mm-hmm. I'm going off not only my own, but some of the feedback we've received from some of the neighbors and concerned residents.
Yeah, so there is a natural heritage constraint there. So that option just, it wasn't looked at because of the natural heritage constraint. It doesn't mean it can't be looked at, but the impacts would have to be addressed, and perhaps it was just deemed not to be feasible right off the bat. Maybe we could throw that question over to Mr. Varatis also. And then just to point out on some of the stuff that we heard from Mr. Varatis, when we look at an amendment to a draft approved plan, when we look at a zoning bylaw amendment, we apply the policies of the day. So we have a new official plan. We ask for these studies to be updated also to address those new policies. I think there was some concern voiced that some of the conditions we were suggesting were too onerous, but those conditions are being recommended because of the recommendations of the technical reports that were completed, and in our view, they're appropriate, and we can discuss those further with the applicant. And the only other thing is, when we talk about discussions about a grid pattern and maybe achieving a grid pattern through this amendment, it's because this amendment takes out the current grid pattern and replaces it with a cul-de-sac. So that's why we feel it's an important topic to discuss. And of course, our official plan says that cul-de-sacs should be avoided. So if that's what our policies say, then we just want to have a little more fulsome discussion with this developer about why can't they have a grid pattern. And maybe there are grading concerns, maybe there are issues in that particular area where the grid used to be, but are there alternate locations where a grid could be achieved? Is there an alternate second entrance that could be achieved? So those are just the discussions that we need to have with them. And that's all I'd point out.
Okay, thanks for that. And I will ask if Mr. Varatis is still with us, which I'm sure he is, if he'd like to provide a response at this point.
Yeah, no problem, sure. So I guess the first thing we'll talk about is traffic. I know that was raised by the neighbors and by Councillor Weeb as well too. As Richard's already stated, there has been a traffic impact study that was prepared that didn't flag a concern for the additional 14 lots that were being proposed as an increase in density. There were recommendations made to the improvement of that intersection. As Richard has mentioned, they don't align perfectly. So there was some recommendations made by the traffic engineer as to what the maximum offset for the two roads coming into each other could be, and like in order to achieve a safe intersection, those types of things would be implemented by way of the final design of the subdivision roadway network when, if and when it's either the 45 lot subdivision or the 59 lot subdivision. But in terms of the improvements to Chaffey Township Road, there were no recommendations made to accommodate this additional traffic to the roadway itself. But it sounds like the town is looking at improving that roadway, and obviously, sidewalks would probably solve a lot of the issues that we heard from the one resident in terms of like walking the dog or feeling safe while walking on that roadway. In terms of I just want to touch a little bit about there was the issue with the grading of the property and it causing erosion and stormwater concerns. If this property is developed, as you know, a stormwater management plan has already been designed from a preliminary nature, and a final stormwater management plan would be designed and implemented on site. I imagine a lot of the concerns for erosion and runoff would be eliminated just by the fact that this entire property would now be controlled, the stormwater would be controlled more effectively and engineered to make sure that there wasn't any impacts in the surrounding neighborhood properties. So I imagine that issue would go away as well. In terms of the second access, there is, as Richard mentioned in his initial presentation, there is a proposal for a connection to a property next door as part of the subdivision design. That was both in the original design and carried forward into the current design as well. Whether or not that connection, which eventually may lead to another access point elsewhere to another roadway, would ever be come to fruition, would be out of our hands because it's adjacent to other private lands. But that has been implemented. Now crossing the creek, as Richard has mentioned, there is a national heritage feature in terms of the creek itself and the creek bank that may have to be probably impacted to the point where I'm not sure if that would be something that would be recommended by an ecologist. Also, just from a financial standpoint, building a bridge to cross that riverbank sort of area, I'm not sure if that would be justifiable from a financial standpoint for the amount of development being proposed here on this property. So I feel like we're stuck with one on this one. Yeah, I know it's not ideal. I know that there was policy that speaks to requiring more than one where possible, but it's not always possible. And I guess that was the notion the first time around as well with the 45 lot approval. And finally, the idea of the walking trail, that sounds like a pretty decent idea to me. I definitely could go back to the landowner and developer on that one and see if we can, maybe nudge some lot lines from between lots in that area and see if we can get like a 5 or 6 meter wide strip of land to connect the end of the cul-de-sac to the roadway at the bottom of the hill. As long as, and we'd have a closer look at what the slope sort of grading is in that area to make sure that it would be safe for people to traverse that through the trail. But we can definitely look at that. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Stone.
So I'm not opposed to the additional lots, but once again, I'm left wanting for parkland. What's shown on here is as little as very possible. And I feel if you're getting 14 more lots, well, 2 of them to parkland would certainly create a much more of a community within the area. I think about Meadow Park and the people living in that area. It's a wonderful place to live. And this doesn't have any communal space. So I would be in support if 2 of the lots could be parkland.
Okay, I'm sure that's being noted. Thank you. Followed by Councillor Fitzgerald.
I think Councillors Weeb and Stone
Covered.
voiced my comments and my questions were answered as well.
Wow.
So thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. It might be a quick question. I noticed when you look at the addition of the lots with the cul-de-sac, I don't see any place for storage of snow. So what is the plan plowing that area for moving snow around through there? It seems.
Richard.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. It's a great question. I believe any roads constructed in the town are going to now have to follow the town's development standards. So when they look at turning circles, there's a turning radius, and it's 15-meter turning radius, and no islands. So that design, part of that design is to incorporate the fact that they need to do snow clearing in the winter, and that's, I believe, as long as those development standards are applied, it wouldn't be an issue. And then, of course, there would be turning circles at both the current northern terminal road as well as the cul-de-sac. So I think that that's been looked at, and we would make sure that that happens through if it's approved through a subdivision agreement.
All right, thank you. I have a quick question with respect to the upgrade of Chafee. That's been on the books for quite some time because we've had a lot of development out there, and I'm just curious if we know as to where that sits on our priority list. And I know that's an unfair question of you, Richard, but I just am curious if you have any sense of it.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, that is an unfair question of me. I have had discussions, though, however, with our operations department, and it would be something that they'd be working on right now with the district. I believe that there's also some improvements to some underground infrastructure that the district was thinking of doing in that area. But instead of being able to do the joint work, I guess the technique that the district is using, like directional boring versus open cut, has meant that we wouldn't be doing those works in a joint fashion any longer. So we are going to be doing the works, but our timelines have changed, and we just need to work on what those new timelines are. But I was told that it was in the near future, and that's as far as I can say.
Okay, thank you. And just as you were saying that, Mayor Terziano put her hand up, so.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Richard, you said that there were natural constraints so that they couldn't come off of Muskoka Road 3 anywhere to the lot, but the further down Chafee Township Road, or closer to Muskoka Road 3, the applicant owns a large piece there. Is there any natural constraint, or was there any particular reason why the entrance had to go opposite Highview?
So thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I can address that. So there are natural constraints along the whole western boundary, and they're associated with the Gypsy Bill Creek, which is a cold water stream, and it's very sensitive. But as far as I know, they haven't examined the potential to go that way. And whether or not that option was just precluded outright because it was, as Mr. Veratis said, the ecologist didn't think it would be supportable, or whether it was just not looked at, I don't know the answer to that. There are ways of constructing bridges over valleys and having a clear span of the entire valley so that there would be no impacts, but then it becomes cost prohibitive. So I think that was the other thing that Mr. Veratis was pointing out, is it may have been too costly a venture to go that direction.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you. I guess I wasn't really thinking down by Gypsy Bill Creek. I was thinking more of there's a lot owned, it looks like it's considered to be Part 1, a lot owned by the applicant, not part of the subdivision plan, and it looks like the road runs right in behind it. So that's where I was asking, just to keep the traffic closer to Muskoka Road 3.
So thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, I do see that that area now. It is the same answer. There is the constraint to deal with across the entire western boundary, that being Gypsy Bill Creek. The other constraint to that particular portion would be the width of the actual entrance point onto Muskoka Road 3, it does look a little narrow, and it would need to be wide enough to accommodate a 20-meter road. So it may be that that's the constraint there. It could be something that we look into further, though.
Okay. Do you want to comment, Kirsten?
Sorry about that. Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe, the Mayor, were you referencing the Block 47 on the original plan of subdivision? So I don't believe that is in the same ownership anymore, the bigger.
Okay,
yeah.
sorry.
Madam Chair, sorry, Mr. Varadas does have his hand up
Oh, does
if
he?
he's able
Okay,
to speak
and,
again.
All right, that would be great. All right, and with that, then I think we're nearing the end of this issue. So, Mr. Varadas, please. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yep.
Perfect. All right. I will. I'll look into the crossing of the creek with an access point as well, and get sort of the bottom as to why that wasn't part of the original approval as well. I'm sure the district would have looked at it at that point in time, and I'll dig around a little bit and find out what the answer is to that. The one question I do have before we sort of just finalize this discussion is the main concern for me here today was the additional studies that were being requested by staff to support this zoning application, which ultimately, holds up the amendment of the draft, the amendment to the draft approval of the original subdivision. I'm just wondering if the committee has any thoughts or any direction as to whether or not they feel a hydro-G study, slope stability assessment, and a wildland fire risk assessment is something that they feel is necessary to accommodate the 14 additional lots being proposed on the subdivision.
Any comments from committee? A quick question of Richard, and that is on the wildland fire, we did have a previous approval for 45 lots. And that when we approved that, that was pre-OP, the updated OP, which wouldn't have required that, right? Is that the thinking behind that?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. That is correct. Also, it predates the policies. The policies were introduced through 2019. And also, the balance of the 14 new lots are located along in the fire hazard area, which straddles both this lot and the lot to the north. So if this lot is developed, that might be fine. The trees would be cleared. But what about the lot to the north where the trees would remain? So that's why which is a hazardous forest type for wildland fires and is identified as a high-risk area. So that's why we said it should be something studied, because those 14 new lots could potentially be in a risk area associated with that particular hazard.
Okay.
And we
thank
have
you.
the policies suggest we ask for it.
Okay, Councillor Weep?
Thank you, Charles Cock. I'm not sure that I'm on board with the wildfire assessment risk being heightened. It seems to me that adding a few more lots would probably break up the vegetation further. I think if you overlaid one subdivision over the other, I can't imagine that one is a higher risk than the other. So I would be okay with foregoing that study. And I had a quick question for Savas, and that is, it was raised earlier, do we know when that house will be demolished? Because it's all well and good to develop a whole stormwater management plan for the entire block, but it seems that there's one small node that's creating some difficulty for a neighbor. I'm wondering if that's at all on the docket.
That question, Savas?
You, Madam Chair, I could definitely raise that question with the landowner. I don't personally know. We never really discussed the demolition of that house. I imagine it probably would be demolished when they start doing actual construction work on the subdivision. But if it's something that they can accelerate in order to make someone's life a little bit easier, then I definitely will put that through to them.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. And I just would echo what Councillor Weep said with respect to the wildfire assessment. I concur with the comments that he just made. And Councillor Fitzgerald.
As do I agree with that. It seems to be an onerous requirement. The nature of the boundaries have not changed, so.
Okay. So some direction from committee, Savas? And with that, I think, oh, Richard, final comment to you. We have to move on.
Yeah, the final comment is just that I just want to be clear
Yep.
that the hazard is on this property. It's also on the property to the north. The 14 additional lots are on the same boundary with the property to the north. And so that we are being asked to approve additional development in the vicinity of a fire hazard area. So that's why we were asking for the study. But if that was already clear, I apologize. I just
No,
wanted to make
not
sure
at all.
that that
You
was
should, no need
crystal
for
clear to everyone.
Yeah, no need for apology at all. My interpretation of what Councillor Weeb said, and this is where I think I concur, is if the applicant hadn't been coming forward with the addition of 11 lots, this would have gone ahead, and they would have been development lots in that area. So I think, is this amendment an additional risk? And I'm not sure that the additional risk is, that's the way I'm interpreting it, and I think that's, all right? Okay, Councillor Fitzgerald, and that, you have the last word on this one.
Okay, so.
I think I've said
my-
that once
my-
already.
My last word would be that if this had been expedited in a timelier fashion, I don't know what the holdups are, or whether it's the applicant's issues, district's issues. If this had been streamlined more, I guess they would have gone ahead and developed without the extra lots being required. So I think we're doing the best we can to work with the applicant. The lots we discussed to the north, and this would be for Richard, I guess, they're not currently under plan of subdivision, are they? So when that time does arise, there may be a fire safety study required then.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Richard, and Savas, and everybody who was here to speak to that. So with that, we are going to move to the second item, and I believe, Madeline, you are up for this. And it is with respect to Z11 2022 HT Scheidel at 351 Griffin Lodge Road.
Good morning, or good afternoon, committee, sorry. And thank you, Madam Chair. Okay. Through you, Madam Chair, the subject property is located at 351 Griffin Lodge Road. The lot is designated rural under Huntsville's official plan and is zoned rural residential in Huntsville's zoning bylaw. The applicant is proposing to change the zoning on the lands from rural residential zone to a rural residential with exception zone. The zoning amendment is to permit a short-term rental accommodation use as an additional permitted accessory use within a 24 square meter existing detached secondary residential dwelling unit. And for the purpose of the presentation, I will be mentioning short-term rental accommodation as STRA and secondary residential dwelling unit as SRDU. In this instance, the proposal reflects the rural designation as the SRDU is entirely hidden from view, being situated on a deep lot and set back appropriately from side yards. There is little visual impact associated with the building itself, given the dense vegetation surrounding it and the location on the lot, being screened from most vantage points. As discussed in the report, the official plan includes policy that recognizes the shortage of available long-term housing rental stock in Huntsville. The conversion of this existing SRDU to an STRA would represent a loss to the possible long-term rental housing stock. However, it should be noted that the SRDU has been designed for the intention of an STRA. Storage and extra living space is an issue when looking at long-term rental potential, and this particular SRDU is located on remote rural lands which are not supported by community services, and therefore it is less likely that this unit would be appropriate for a long-term rental. Both the STRA bylaw and the amended zoning bylaw work together to effectively license and regulate STRAs. The STRA bylaw does not permit any as-of-right accessory structures in the rural residential zone to be licensed, and each request is reviewed on a site-specific basis through a zoning amendment application. In this instance, the SRDU would be an acceptable STRA due to its size and occupancy capacity, individual septic system, and rural location, all of which would contribute to mitigating any negative impacts. The SRDU also meets all zoning requirements for the rural residential zone. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. Multiple letters of support and no objections have been received. District of Muskoka staff have also provided no objection to the proposal. Through staff's review and analysis, the application would appear to conform to the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending approval. And thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Madeline. At this point, I would call upon the applicant or their representative who are present in person or electronically to provide any comments. Aha. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. With me today is Jim Sheetal, the property owner, and his lovely wife, Lynn, is behind us there. We do appreciate the staff report. I would just like to go back a bit in time. The Sheetals built this building initially designing more like a bunkie, but they wanted to develop, when they realized that they needed to have a single detached dwelling to be able to qualify for short-term rental accommodation, they secured a change of use permit so that what was proposed to be a bunkie is now a residential dwelling. So it's officially a secondary residential dwelling, and it has modest but has facilities for cooking. When I talked to Jim and Lynn back in April, and reviewing the short-term rental bylaw and the zoning bylaw, I drew the conclusion that no amendment would be required, and that provided this building, just as their house is a single detached dwelling, that either of those could be used for short-term rental accommodation under the short-term rental bylaw. By definition, a short-term rental is the use of a single detached dwelling. And so I felt that they were in a position to be able to secure a license as of right. Staff are of a different opinion, and I respect staff in terms of opinions, because the nature of some of these bylaws are, they're meant to be precise, but there's language in both the zoning bylaw and the short-term rental bylaw that just don't jive. And there's some ambiguities, some cloudiness, if I might say. I believe I'm right, and Madeline believes she's right, and I respect that. So I think what we decided to do, because of the time of the year, we made a point of saying, I said to Jim, best thing we could do is make an application for a zoning amendment to address the concern raised by staff, to get it into the system, to work it through the system, and regardless of whose interpretation of the bylaw is correct or incorrect. And we appreciate that the staff recommendation is favorable. And so my clients look forward to the bylaw being passed. At the same time, there's a degree of frustration to the extent that, if they had the ability to secure a license as of right, and I believe they do, that they've gone through an additional expense and additional time delay, not only expensive hiring one of the best planners in Muskoka, but also, oh, I should say the best plan, but also the cost of the zoning application, the time it takes to get it to this point, and then also the bylaw having to be passed by council, and then an appeal period to lapse. And as you can appreciate, this is sort of like the prime time to be offering up short-term rental accommodation, and you can see how attractive and lovely the building is that they've constructed, and how desirable it would be for people wanting to secure short-term rental accommodation visiting the area. So there's that issue as well in terms of the time. And what I would like to ask is that council or committee recommend approval of the bylaw to council, but that also that the town look more closely, whether it would be the CAO or someone else in the organization who would be able to look at, the clerk maybe, to look at the language of the two bylaws, and especially the short-term rental accommodation bylaw, to see if one interpretation is correct and one is not. And I think one of the confusions arising from the short-term rental accommodation bylaw is when we get down to the definition, we're talking about single-family dwelling, and then when we talk about a dwelling under the zoning bylaw, it says a dwelling is a building designed or used for residential occupancy, and it goes on to describe and then it says as its principal use. So I think as soon as we introduce the word principal use in describing a dwelling, there's some confusion as to whether that's the principal use of the land, or is it the fact that this building was designed, its principal use in the design was that it would be used as a dwelling. So that's where I think the genesis of the confusion comes from. I believe under the zoning bylaw, you're allowed to have two single-family dwellings on a property. One would be maybe the principal residence, and one would be a secondary residential dwelling unit, and that both or either of those could be licensed. And so I would hope that the town could look at that more closely. I don't think it's fair that people go through this process unnecessarily, and if it's just come to light through this instance, I think it would be appropriate if the town could look at it more closely, and maybe even look at maybe refunding part of the costs. I could give the town a discount on my fees. But anyway, I don't know if Jim wanted to add anything more to that, but we do appreciate the staff recommendation, and hope that the planning committee will give favorable consideration today. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you for your comments. And Mr. Sheetal, did you want to add anything to that, or?
I'll just get my signature here.
Okay. You can.
Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and Planning Committee, and thank you, Madeline. We had a chance to meet a few weeks ago, and you came and take a look at our property, and I think we had a good discussion at that time. I think Wayne has indicated this has been a difficult time for Lynn and myself. We built this building in good faith when we went through the application process for the building permit. We were very above board at the time that this was for short-term rental. At no time had we been told that it would not be allowed, until we went, when we were just in the final process of building, of the finishing, and applied for the short-term rental, and were told that it could not be used that way. Lynn and I think both lost about 5 years of our life at that point, thinking that this might be the most expensive unit in Huntsville for family and friends to use in the future, because our whole future really as retirees was for this property to be a source of income for us, that we could stay on our property and also provide the necessary income. As we know, as we age, we're all susceptible to additional expenses, and we wanted this to be that source of income. So again, Madeline, thank you for your work on proposing this go through. We appreciate that. I just wanted to give my comments and thank you again for everything you've done.
Thank you very much for those comments. And at this point, I would ask if there are any members of the public who are present here in person or electronically if they'd like to speak to this application. I'm not seeing any here.
Chair Alcock, I see no hands raised.
Okay, that's good. And I can move right along. I will, before I turn it to committee, I'm going to read the motion, if all right with you, Councillor Fitzgerald. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wiebe, seconded by Councillor Stone. It is recommended that Planning Committee recommend approval of zoning bylaw amendment Z11 2022 HT, the purpose and effect of which is to rezone the subject lands from a rural residential zone to a rural residential with exception zone to permit a short-term rental accommodation use as an additional permitted accessory use within a 24 square metered existing detached secondary residential dwelling unit. With that, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Just a comment in regards to the request for a reduction in fees. I think, Mr. Simpson, that you had a very selfless opportunity to sell your wares as the best planner in town, so maybe you could provide a pro bono to your client with all the work that you're going to receive from the general public from your comment.
Madam Chair, he was my landlord at one point, and he didn't give me a break on the rent, so.
This is way too informal, I have to say. Thank you for that and that. Are there any other questions? No? Oh, yes, Councillor Wiebe, sorry.
Thanks, Chair Alcock. Just a quick comment. I hope that our staff heard that, what was said by the proponent, just because it strikes me as being a hiccup in our process that no one should have to repeat. So I hope that gets ironed out, and I will be in support of this.
Thank you for that. Your worship? No. Okay. Yes, Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. I think this is a great opportunity for us to learn by short-term rentals being on the same piece of property as the owner, because that makes policing much easier for us and our bylaw system. So good for you for doing something like this.
I would echo those comments. All right, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you for coming today. All right, with that, we are on to the next file, Z12 2022 HDMB 28-29. And it's Wolf at 41 Florence Street West. And Kelsey, you are taking over.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 41 Florence Street West. The lot is designated urban residential and is zoned residential 1. The application is before you for information. The zoning bylaw amendment application is to rezone the proposed severed lots from residential 1 to residential 2 to permit the creation of 2 lots with 15 meters of road frontage. The 2 consent applications were submitted concurrently to create these residential lots. The severed lots would have frontage on Rice Lane, and the retained lot would have frontage on Florence Street West. So here's the lots in question. As discussed in the report, the lots would be in keeping with the urban residential character and conform with the density standards. However, through a site visit, staff noted that an unevaluated, unmapped wetland was abutting the south lot line. Without delineation of the wetland, staff were unable to determine if development will result in any negative impacts, nor whether there will be appropriate or adequate building setbacks to this feature. Therefore, no staff recommendation has been made until the wetland boundary can be delineated and identified by a professional biologist, and a suitable buffer identified as well to ensure these features are protected. The application was circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. The district had no objection to the approval. The operation department noted that with the new entrance, there is no room for snow storage related to the municipal operations, as Rice Lane is only 10 meters wide. Possible turnaround options must be investigated further by the applicant. The fire department and building department also commented that adequate turnaround facilities must be provided on Rice Lane to ensure emergency vehicle access. A letter of objection was also received, which speaks to the capacity of the road and traffic concerns. Based on staff's review, further turnaround design and consultation with operations, as well as a technical report delineating the wetland, are required prior to staff making a recommendation. Once these items are further discussed and provided, staff can make a recommendation, but at this time, this item is only brought to you for information. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Kelsey. And at this point, I would ask if the applicant or their representative is here either electronically or in person. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Bob Wolf, 41 Forest Street West. I got a call from Kelsey last Friday, and she let me know that there were these issues that came up, and so I've only had a couple of days to give it much thought, but I can give a couple of quick comments. The wetland area is not on the property, but near it, and there might be a small portion of the southeast corner that is in the wetland, but I've walked the property line, and certainly 99% of it's dry. As far as the biologist coming, I'm sure that's something that's required, and if there's a certain distance a building has to be, then that's his call, not mine, so we'll have to look into that. The second comment would be on the Snow Plow, and there is a turnaround area, and I know that that is being used as frontage for the new lots. There is lots of room there. I don't know who's going to end up developing that property at this point, but I'm sure, they'll have to look at where they'd be putting a house, where they'd be putting a driveway, and, where the town can move the snow and turn around their vehicles. I know presently, for the last 25 years, they've had no problem pushing the snow and turning the vehicle around and going. And I think that would apply as well to fire trucks and ambulances. But I'm sure in the end, there will be a decision made as to how much room is necessary. And I'm sure there's lots of room in that area that they can be accommodated.
Okay. Thank you for that. Bob, you have to write your name down, just because that's the way we do it.
Yep.
That's great, thank you. So, at this point, I would ask if there are any members of the public who would like to speak to this application, either here in person or electronically.
Chair Alcock, I see no hands raised.
Okay. And, okay, with that, then I will ask committee if there are any questions. We don't have a motion, so Councillor Weed.
Quickly, thank you, Chair Alcock. Rice Lane, so that to remain the width that it is, it's not going to be changing to a municipal standard, because it's my understanding that as it stands doesn't meet the full size of a municipal roadway. So would it stay as is, given this development?
I'm going to ask Kelsey to speak to that.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. We got the comment last week, so I've been trying to reach out to operations, but I haven't gotten the full extent of the options. But I imagine it would just be the turnaround, not the entire road,
Right.
that would be being assessed. So that's just the end portion that you maybe saw in the photos.
Okay, great, thanks. Just to comment to say, I think this has real merit, and I'd hope to see it come to fruition.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. And Mayor Terziano.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Kelsey, I take it Public Works is aware when they make their comments. I don't believe Rice Lane is plowed by a regular size truck. I believe there's maybe a 3/4 ton that plows that lane. So are we talking about enough of a turnaround for a 3/4 ton truck or an actual plow truck?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. We didn't have a chance to discuss that, so that's something that I think we could clarify with the applicant and myself and through operations when we further discuss and come back with more information. But thank you for the question.
Okay, perfect, that's great. And Councillor Fitzgerald?
Thank you, Chair Alcock. Through you to Kelsey. There's, I think, 6 homes on Rice Lane right now that have driveways and access off of Rice Lane to their properties? Or is it 5? I can't really tell from the map, so. Is it 4? It's 5.
Thank you for the question. I'm just quickly counting.
Okay. Thank you for that.
So I believe it's 4.
4? Okay. And follow-up?
There, yeah, I guess just a comment. I'm familiar with the street, and it seems to be a standard practice that they request this, and this is something we have to do, move forward, is have first responder access, but certainly they can have access and get down there, they just don't have a turnaround. So I just want to make that point.
Okay, all right. No other questions or comments? I just wanted to say, Bob, thank you for appearing, and hopefully this will be back at our next cycle. All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, Kelsey, you have to stay right there as we're moving to our last public item, and that is Z13 2022, 814 Lynx Lake Road.
Great, thank you so much, Madam Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 814 Lynx Lake Road. The lot is designated rural and is zoned Rural 1. The applicant is proposing to construct a single detached dwelling on the subject lands. The zoning bylaw amendment would change the zoning of the lands from Rural 1 to Rural 1 with exception, which would permit the construction of a single detached dwelling on lands not having access or frontage on a year-round maintained public road. As discussed in the report, the official plan does not support residential use on rural lands without frontage on a year-round maintained road because of the potential long-term adverse impacts of this development pattern. Rural residential development should be encouraged to be located within areas surrounded by other rural residential development on a year-round publicly maintained road, as well as accessible to community amenities and services. Rural residential development should not be located in remote, undeveloped areas which pose a risk to permanent residents with limited security and health services. To meet the intent of the official plan, other landowners have upgraded the road at their sole expense. The applicant in this instance was not proposing to upgrade the road, nor have it assumed by town maintenance assumed. When looking at the provincial policy statement, which applies across Ontario, policies encourage a broad mix of housing that is compatible with rural landscapes and appropriate to infrastructure which is planned or available. The appropriate road infrastructure is not available on the subject property, therefore the proposal is not consistent with the provincial policy statement. And here's just where the dwelling is proposed on the property, and some photos. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. 3 letters of support were received. District staff identified high-risk wildland fire hazard and recommended that the zoning be further amended to direct development out of this area, or that a holding provision be added to utilize the requirement of the submission of an assessment report for the wildland fire hazard. The Operations Department does not support the approval, and they recommend the road be upgraded to a municipal standard for year-round tenancy. The Building Department requires an agreement be registered on title to maintain the road onto a fire access standard, or that the house design incorporates sprinklers. The fire department also recommended automatic on-site fire protection be installed in all residential structures, as well as other access and mitigation practices. Through staff review and analysis, the application would appear not to conform with the intent of the official plan or be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending denial. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kelsey. Is the applicant, if the applicant or the applicant's representative is here, right there, all right, please come forward. Thank you.
I am Stephen Traves, and this is my wife Sarah, and my uncle Terry. We're from we're
1099
Aspiden currently, but we're proposing this dwelling on 814 Lynx Lake Road. The property has been in the family for generations, as well as adjacent properties. We are quite familiar with the road and the maintenance required of it. We have actually been the ones responsible for maintaining this section of road for 3 generations. So, and by trade, I'm a heavy equipment operator. I own and maintain my own equipment. And so by trade, I am maintaining roads like this for people along, mostly along shoreline residential, where it is still acceptable to get a permit for a smaller road like this. So we going into it, I've had this property since 2009, and we were looking for a place to raise our family, a place that's affordable. I've looked into modular homes, and in fact, we have a down payment on a modular home before I realized that there was a planning issue. So going into it, we have our eyes open. We cannot get hydro in there, we would be totally off grid, but as far as maintaining the road to a standard to get emergency services in, that would not be a problem. We, if the proposal goes through, would be able to tow a tractor trailer with a 66-foot long modular by 16 feet wide would have to be able to navigate into that building set place. So if that's possible, then I don't see how emergency services would have issue. We've just, I needed, looking into upping the road, I knew that was one of the options, but it's just not affordable if somebody's looking at it for affordable housing. So we were basically looking in to get into an affordable place without a lot of extra cost. So,
just as a sidebar, in 1987, I was given a building.
Terry, you have to speak into the mic. Thank you, and that's good.
So in 1987, I was given a building permit and a road agreement that I still have, that I've never thrown out. I would pass it around. Down that same Lynx Lake Road, at the end of it, my family has been in there since 1967, and we've paid taxes on it for the past 50 years, and we've got 2 loads of gravel. And there's 3 buildings on it, 3 lots that are paying at least $2,000 a year in taxes, not asking for anything except to be able to build a resident in there, maintain it. We have a fire pump for fire precautions. We know the property well, and it seems a shame that you can't use what you already have. I don't know what bearing that has, that permit that, you know, the road would not be maintained, which I was quite comfortable with. we're quite able to maintain it ourselves. But if we don't have Stephen in there, we don't have the equipment to do it, and it becomes impossible to get to your property.
Okay,
So,
that's
I'm-
helpful.
yeah.
Thank you. All right, so with that, stay put. I am going to ask if there are members of the public who would like to speak to this application, either electronically or who might be here. And Jen, is there anybody electronically?
No, Chair Alcock, I see no hands raised.
Okay, so with that, I am going to read the motion that has been put before us, and then I will ask committee for questions or comments. It has been moved by Councillor Wiebe, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald, I believe. It is recommended that Planning Committee recommend denial of zoning bylaw amendment Z13 2022 HT, the purpose and effect of which is to change the zoning from a rural 1 zone to a rural 1 with exception zone to permit construction of a single detached dwelling on lands having no frontage on a year-round maintained public road. With that, I will ask if there are questions. So Councillor Stone.
Thank you. Once again, this type of thing is before us, and I believe it's an error in our official plan. If somebody owns 100 acres and wants to live on it, who are we to say they can't? I think the building permit that is given in order to make this happen should include some things that are going to help protect the citizens, such as a sprinkler system. And if we need to have them do a wildland fire study, I'm happy with that too. But I absolutely, and I will move an amendment to approve this.
Okay, thank you for that. And I all of a sudden, I saw 3 hands at once. So forgive me. I'm going to be, just because I have to go to Councillor Fitzgerald first, but followed by Councillor Wiebe, followed by Councillor Armour.
Just because, thank you, Chair Alcock. I couldn't agree more with Councillor Stone, and I was going to suggest the same amendment to approve, so I'd be happy to second that. I'd be very curious to see the location of the house and where the fire risk is on this 100 acres. You know, I see a pond, I see a huge cleared area. I'm wondering if that's something that's even necessary at this point.
Okay, and perhaps I think Kelsey is pulling it up again. Is that what you're doing?
Yes, thank you. If I could just have a second,
then
I'll pull it up.
That's
Thank you.
fine, and then I will go to Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. And I'm wondering, after Kelsey, you're done pulling that up, if we couldn't see maybe the map of the whole area. I'm wondering who's all on that road as it is now, who lives there full time, where does the maintenance stop, et cetera. So I'd like to get a little better sense of the lay of the land there, the wider shot, I guess, if you will. I too am leaning towards the previous comments that if the risks are mitigated, then everyone's happy, right? So it could be in the end getting over our stringent policy and finding a solution that works for everybody. So I'm curious to see that map.
Okay, all right.
Just a couple comments in response. I don't know, I never heard about this wildland fire hazard before, but the pond is man-made. I actually made it about 12 years ago. It's over 8 feet deep. There's plenty of water to pump from in an emergency situation. And the house would be abutting fairly close to that area, which is the front corner of the land. And there's a large cleared field only a couple 100 meters beyond the woods that run between the house and and then the pond area, and there's another field. And it's about 500 meters from the end of the existing maintained section to my driveway entrance. And then the driveway would go in another about 200 meters in.
Okay, thank you for that.
Can I
And
follow up?
Yes.
Can you tell me what's between your driveway and that maintained portion of the road? The 500 meters? Is there nothing there?
It's just the non-maintained road.
There's no other access points or no other driveways?
There's, no, the last building is right at the very edge of the maintained road. They
Yeah.
brought up a section about 200, maybe 200 feet, 300 feet, up to standard about 10 years ago, maybe more, maybe 12 years ago or more, to town standards to allow them to build. So it's an adjoining 75 acres. So you have basically the width of, I would say, almost 100 acres.
Right.
Between
Okay.
the two driveways.
Thanks.
Yes, Terry, you want to follow up on that particular?
The other 100 acres on the
Yeah, the mic, sorry. That's good that Councillor Armour's keeping me in check here. That's good. That's great.
My fingers fix watches, not push
I
buttons.
know that's true.
The 100 acres on the other side
Mm-hmm.
is Crown land.
Okay,
So that just, so it will be undeveloped.
okay. Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. Thanks for coming today. I actually drove out there today to your place to have a look. I actually took my Ford Focus through there just so I get through. No problem, drove down, turned around, come back out. You know, we have an official plan, as you know, and I hate going against it, but this is, I think, 4 months in a row we've had somebody come to this committee asking to build on an unmaintained road. And I think it's really something we need to look at. Affordable housing, as you mentioned, that's an opportunity. You know the risks.
We have 2 kids.
You know, and I can support this, and good for you for bringing it forward and trying to do something that's good for yourself, good for your land. Going off grid, your footprint's going to be less due to that, and good. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. And Your Worship.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I guess my question is for the building department to issue you a permit, they're going to want it sprinklered. I'm not sure with the type of home you're bringing in, whether that's easy to do or expensive to do. And I guess I'm just wondering, have you weighed out the differences and the things that they're going to ask you to do to be on an unmaintained road versus bringing up the 300 meters to a maintained road, being as that you're an equipment operator?
Well, the fact that I'm an equipment operator doesn't give me free gravel, unfortunately.
Right.
And it's if it was just the gravel and just the time, then I would probably bring it right up to spec. But it's the engineering. It's the fact that I would have to hire a firm to come in and do an assessment to probably go $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 just in engineering fees, let alone gravel. We have been, as I said, maintaining the road. I actually traded, my bush was logged this past winter. I traded for gravel, so I could
afford it.
Afford it, exactly, and to be able to just keep the road passable, because there was getting to be a point where I could drive an ATV, go up a hill onto what should have been solid ground, and the ATV would disappear. So we have invested in it already in maintaining and bringing the road up to a point where we can continue to have access to our property. But, I mean, as far as a fire system, I was gonna even see if it was feasible. I don't know, as far as I haven't talked to the building department, whether they would allow a separate pump station like we have in the lakes around here, where you put a gas pump, a fire pump right in a box, ready to access for fire suppression. If that was something that they will allow me to do, then that would be the rate I would go, because the house is already pre-made. It basically comes in one piece and is set in location on a slab, so.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, Kelsey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have the items to share on the screen.
Okay, perfect.
So this is the district mapping showing the wildland fire hazard risk. So it's not overlaid with the the dwelling, but the dwelling is within the orange portion, and these comments were provided in the report. So the orange is high, the pink is moderate, and the purple is pine. So you could kind of see where my little cursor is there. It's roughly where the dwelling is. So those were the district's comments as well as in our review. And then I don't know if Councillor Weeb still wanted to see the aerial district
No,
or the
that's
mapping.
okay. I got a pretty clear with what I have in front of me versus some of the comments. I think I've got it.
Perfect.
Okay. And it was Councillor Fitzgerald that I think wanted to.
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
just,
sorry.
I'm
That's
just
okay.
curious for my follow-up. Thank you, Chair Alcock. Where is the pond located in relation to where your cursor was and the, would you say 500-meter area that's cleared towards the bush? Is that actually in that high-risk area, or is it?
Thank you for the question, through you, Madam Chair. It is within the area. I don't know why our mapping is not generating very quickly. Oh, there we go. So you can see the pond and the existing, there's a woodland retreat here, and the dwelling's approximately in this area. So if we look at the overlaid, like around the property lines, you could see where it is relative to the wildland fire hazard mapping.
Excuse me. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Which, for all intents and purposes, has a pond in it and a huge cleared area.
That's what it looks like to me.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's a little bit. Councillor Armour?
Just to follow up to that, actually, when I drove in there today, it's quite open, in that whole area, and that pond is quite visible, actually. It's very large.
Large.
Yeah. So it is, probably takes up a large portion of that whole corner there.
Okay. Terry, last comment on?
My comment on the fire rating area, would it be based on the fact that about 70 years ago, a forest fire went through there? It's just a question, because when I go through the bush, which we've been going through for years and years, it's very mature now. There is original farm fields that are cleared, and there is still old black stumps in there, but there definitely was a forest fire went through there.
Interesting.
And I'm wondering if that still is why the rating is showing as high as it is. It's just a question.
No, thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. It is informed by the ministry's mapping, so
It could very well be.
it's updated based on, I think, aerial imagery and then site verification. So,
Okay.
yes.
All right, thank you. And, yes.
Sorry, I can't get this. This is kind of a side note, but I'm just speaking the fact of my family. Affordable housing in this area is terrible, very terrible. We have 2 children who are at Riverside Public School. We both work in this area. We support the economy. My children woke up this morning actually praying that all you guys would listen to our plea. We have a house that's on hold. We are renting right now. This is our hope of supporting this economy. Our children are the future of Muskoka. This is our hope of the next generation.
Okay.
This is basically our way of living in Muskoka. If you guys don't show some understanding and mince these bylaws, it will have impact not only on the mental health of my children, but of the next generation of Muskoka. And my husband and I, we support this economy through many clientele and jobs, and we are people of morale, and we want to do things right. That's why we're here.
Okay.
But thank you for your time.
No, and thank you for your
We truly
comments.
appreciate it.
We absolutely appreciate your comments, and I believe we will have a motion ready. I think we have a motion ready. We have moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Armour, I think. In response.
Oops, I gotta get it working too. All right, through you, Chair Alcock, I do have an amendment drafted that I can share if everyone wanted to review and see if that's what you're looking for.
I would like that, please. Okay, so we have a motion moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Armour. It is recommended that Planning Committee recommend approval of zoning bylaw amendment Z 13, 2022, HT, the purpose and effect of which is to change the zoning from a rural 1 zone to a rural 1 with exception zone to permit construction of a single detached dwelling on lands having no frontage on a year-round maintained public road, and impose site plan control to acknowledge access will be on a non-year-round maintained road, and that no municipal services will be available, and that the dwelling must be fully sprinklered. So, questions, Councillor Fitzgerald?
I think sprinklered may be too confining in the solutions they come up with for this property. So how about suitable firefighting capabilities as agreeable to the building department?
I think that it's fine. I have a question, though. I thought that sprinklered was actually now part of the building code, no? And on this? No, it isn't. It's just... and if it's not, then absolutely, I concur. I think your wording is bang on.
Through you, Chair Alcock, I believe that the building code specifies that there are alternate types of fire protection that they consider. However, sprinklering is the one that they have considered most frequently.
Right.
But as long as it's addressed to the requirements of the building code.
So that's...
Then, because the chief building official can't do anything that doesn't meet the building code requirements.
But it sounds like that's similar to the wording you're suggesting, Councillor.
Yeah, I don't think it's actually a building code requirement. It's an agreeable solution to the problem. So I think we need to leave it up to our CBO and his department to determine what is suitable.
That's
rather
exactly
than
what Kirsten just said.
Limited. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. That's exactly what she just said.
All apologies, I didn't hear correctly.
That's all right.
And there was one item further about the fire study as well.
Okay.
I kind of made a motion that I didn't think that was necessary, and maybe a little onerous, considering the size of the pond and the land that's cleared.
Okay, now was the fire study, it wasn't part of the motion? No, it was just with reference to the sprinkler, but we're changing the wording to consider the comments you just made, Councillor Fitzgerald. Yeah, fire suppression system, how's that? To the satisfaction of the CBO.
Julie, you could use the language I forwarded to you.
Okay. There we go. That's so great. I'm getting really, this is so weird, this whole experience. We're getting voices from every, whoa. And our sound system is much improved, right? From the old days, isn't it? I feel like I'm on a spaceship.
Can I just comment on that real quick? while we're
On
waiting?
the spaceship?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, okay.
I find those mics still a little bit weak, like especially
They are a little bit,
Kelsey's.
but you had a very booming voice. It was good. It was good. At one point, I thought maybe you're supposed to be closer, but then I realized, no, it's okay. You're fine. Apparently. Okay, Julie's going to put it up in no time.
Just to follow up, Chair Alcock, if I may?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, that
Councillor.
was the recommendation from the district.
But
If
it wasn't in
If we
our
were to
motion.
approve it, no.
It wasn't in our motion.
No.
So, just saying. But I think that's good that you're just checking that. Good to make people laugh. All right, here we go. So everything else is the same right up to the second half, which is and impose site plan control to acknowledge access will be on a non-year-round maintained road and that no municipal services will be available. And further that the dwelling must be fully sprinklered or other appropriate fire suppression or mitigation measures to the satisfaction of the town. Is that? Or include, okay, thank you. No, no worries at all. This is the best. This is this is very good. Or include other appropriate fire suppression or mitigation measures to the satisfaction of the town. Your worship.
Just a question for clarification. Does this actually say that there'll be no municipal services ever provided out there, i.e. ambulance, police?
Right,
Like-
that doesn't seem right.
It doesn't.
Because we have other non-municipal roads that still receive the benefits of ambulance services.
Through you, Chair Alcock, the agreement, when we get to the agreement, there are clauses that detail that no municipal services are available. That the owner of the property is acknowledging that municipal services will not be available to the property. And then if an ambulance can get there, that's great, but if they can't, that it removes the liability from the town.
Okay, but it doesn't mean that they can't ever expect, if the road is maintained, and there's an emergency, then we still have the expectation that the ambulance will make every effort. But if they can't, because of the condition.
This is why the town has, and staff have been not resistant, but trying to impose and recognize that services aren't going to be available every day of every year for a property that's not on a municipally maintained road. And so the only way we can get around being any liability concerns is if we include wording that no services will be available. And then if an ambulance driver or the fire department thinks they can get there, that's totally on their decision and up to them to see if they can access or not, so.
What's it, a paramedic?
Any.
A paramedic, all right, paramedic. Perhaps you'd like to weigh in on that. So basically, this is wording that we require. All right, with an understanding. Yes, Councillor Fitzgerald?
Thank you, Chair Alcock. Do we have the same requirement for the roads or private roads that are not necessarily navigable for an SR2 zoning or an SR1?
No, we don't, because in those instances, the provisions of the building code are different. The town is not maintaining the roads in the first place or anticipated to maintain the roads if it's a private road. So there's no liability on our part if the road isn't being maintained because it's not our responsibility. But when it's a road that's our property and it's an extension of our road, then there's different liability issues. So that's,
Okay, I did too. So I think you've heard the whole discussion around this, and there is a general understanding. But you have the capability to ensure that that road is maintained, so that's brilliant. Okay. All right, are there any questions or comments additional to this amendment? Good, Councillor Fitzgerald finished. So I will call the question with respect to the proposed amended motion. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, it carries. So now I need to read the main motion as amended.
Yes, that's correct. And to standardize it, you can just proceed with just acknowledging that and call the question.
Okay.
Rather than rereading it.
So I would like to read the main motion as amended, although I've read the main motion and I've read the amendment. So all those in favor of the main motion as amended. And that carries. Thank you for all of your time today. Okay, so that's it for the public portion, and I am required to read the final. Now that all comments have been received, I declare these public meetings respecting the above applications to be concluded. We will now move to the non-public portion of the meeting. If the applicant or their agent wishes to make comments regarding their application, they may do so after the staff presentation. Okay, good. Do people need a 5-minute break? 5 minute? Okay, 5 minute. We have, the mayor is on a schedule, but just 5 minutes I think we can afford. Okay. Perfect. Excellent. So with that, we are moving along to reports from municipal officers, starting with 7.1 with Kelsey on SPA 13, 2022, 771, 774 Ontario Inc., 11 Howland Drive.
Great, thank you so much. I'll try to speak a bit louder. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 11 Howland Drive. The property is designated business employment and is zoned light industrial. The applicant is seeking approval for a site plan amendment agreement to permit the construction of a 440 square meter canopy, which you could see highlighted around the existing warehouse or a retail establishment, and the construction of an addition of 264 meters squared to the existing light industrial use. The rental establishment and its expansion are consistent with the uses permitted in the business employment area. The proposed use is also in keeping with the zoning permission and appears to generally meet the relevant provisions of the zoning bylaw. Relocation or removal of accessory buildings will be required to ensure that they are appropriately set back from the property lines. This is in addition to further vegetation being required, but since the applicant has added some along the side, so there's just little tweaks like that to work out, but everything else is in conformity with the zoning bylaw. Oops. So here's an elevation of the canopy and the warehouse. So here's the warehouse addition and then the canopy. The town's operation department had no objections, as well as the district's public works and environment department. Ministry of Transportation and CN were also circulated, as this is abutting their two corridors, and neither agency had concerns. The application appears to conform with the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement. Staff are recommending approval of the site plan application, subject to address the outstanding matters noted in the report and any requests for revisions from relevant review agencies. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you, Kelsey. I would ask if the applicant or the representative would like to speak to this application. That's maybe, or just, or, okay, you don't have to. You don't have to at all. This is not a requirement at all, but I actually am required to ask, so there we go. I think Kelsey did a bang-up job myself. There you go, and with lots of nods. So I do have a motion, and I will read it. It has been moved by Councillor Wiebe, seconded by Councillor Armour. Be it resolved that the Director of Development Services approve site plan application SPA 13-2022 HD, and that the agreement be prepared to the satisfaction of the town, and further that the Mayor and Clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all other commenting agencies. Questions or comments from committee? I don't see any. All those in favor? That's a resounding yes. So, thank you very much. Exciting plans, actually. All right, next one on the list, and it's still with you, Kelsey, SPA 16-2022 HD Collins 78 Chaffey Township Road.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 78 Chaffey Township Road. The lot is designated urban residential and is zoned residential 3 holding and conservation. The applicant is seeking approval for the site plan agreement to permit the construction of 3 4-unit multiple residential dwelling buildings for a total of 12 total units on the subject lands. Planning Committee considered the zoning bylaw amendment for this property and use, and Council approved the application Z15 2021 on December 13th, 2021. This site plan is to implement the development approved through that application. So here's the proposal, these 3 4-story fourplexes and the elevations. The use and density are consistent with the permitted uses in the urban residential designation of the official plan. Constraints mapping identifies deer wintering habitat, or deer yard, on the subject lands. However, impacts to this habitat are unlikely, as the property is cleared where the development is proposed. The proposed use is also in keeping with the zoning permissions and appears to generally meet all relevant provisions in the zoning bylaw. Prior to the issuance of the site plan approval, the holding provision shall be removed as the district has confirmed the folding is no longer needed. The town's operation department had no concerns. In regards to the sidewalk, it is recommended that the owner review the requirements of the pedestrian infrastructure in consultation with the operations department. The District of Muskoka Environmental and Public Works Department commented that the development must connect to municipal water and sewer services and be consistent with their requirements to do such. The fire department and building department requested fire access be provided to be in conformity with their bylaw. The route was revised and added to the plan. The application appears to conform with the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement. And staff are now recommending approval of the site plan, subject to the conditions that are outstanding, as noted in the report, and any requested revisions from relevant review agencies. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Once again, thank you, Kelsey, and I will once again ask if the applicant or the representative is either here or with us electronically and would like to speak to this.
Chair Alcock, I see no hands raised electronically.
Okay, all right, so with that, I will read the motion moved by Councillor Weeb, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that Director of Development Services approves site plan application SPA 16 2022 HTE, and that the agreement be prepared to the satisfaction of the town. Further, that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all other commenting agencies. Okay, questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you for that. And Kelsey, one more time with SPA 38-2022, 1000055 Ontario Corp, 228 Main Street West.
Great. Thank you so much again, Madam Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 228 Main Street West. The lot is designated highway commercial and is zoned, it's designated business employment and is zoned highway commercial. The applicant is seeking approval of for a site plan agreement to permit the construction of a 178 square meter veterinary clinic, as you can see highlighted here. The veterinary clinic is consistent with the uses permitted in the business employment designation of the official plan. The redevelopment of the property will also enhance the landscaping on the property and the overall appearance from Main Street West. A traffic impact brief was provided to assess the capacity and transportation impacts. The brief concluded that the existing road infrastructure has appropriate capacity to accommodate the net increased traffic for the redevelopment, and no road improvements are recommended. The proposed use is also in keeping with the zoning permissions and all relevant provisions of the zoning bylaw. So this is the existing building. The operations department has no objections to the wastewater management plan. The District of Muskoka Public Works staff also commented that the development must be connected and conform to and be suitably sized for, the connection must be suitably sized for the development. The property is within the MTO development control area, and their comments on both the traffic impact brief and stormwater management plan are forthcoming and must be addressed as appropriate. Notwithstanding this, the application appears to conform with the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement. Staff are therefore recommending approval of the site plan, subject to the conditions, the outstanding conditions noted in the report, and any other revisions required by relevant review agencies. Thank you so much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
And thank you for that, Kelsey. So once again, I would ask if the applicant or their representative would like to speak to this application. You've got nothing. Okay, well, listen, perfect. Now we know. That's great. With that, I will then move and read the motion, which states, it has been moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Councillor Stone. Be it resolved that the Director of Development Services approve site plan application SPA 38-2022 HT, and that the agreement be prepared to the satisfaction of the town. Further, that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation, conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all other commenting agencies. Comments, questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Good luck. It's great. Okay, and last item under this part of our agenda is SPA 43, 2022, Brunel Road Management 24 and 26 Veterans Way. And I think Richard's walking over to speak to this.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, the subject property is located at 24 and 26 Chaffey Township Road. This application is to authorize a site layout to facilitate a development on the lands which committee considered in September and October of 2021 through zoning bylaw amendment application Z13-2021. The zoning on the lands was changed through that application to a residential 4 withholding and exception 0494 zone as a result of that process. As before, the application is for a 2-story, 6-unit multi-dwelling building to the rear of the existing duplex at 24 Veterans Way, so shown here. And it's also proposed that the development would include shared access and parking between 24 and 26 Veterans Way. The applicant intends to work with the district to provide new rental units as affordable/attainable housing, and will seek funding under their the Muskoka Affordable Housing Initiative program. The applicant is also working with the town respecting the provision of pedestrian infrastructure along Veterans Way. As committee will recall, there is a holding provision applicable to the lands which requires both of these items to be addressed prior to development proceeding. And the proposed development appears to comply with the site-specific zoning provisions. However, some minor changes may be needed to the plans to address specific landscaping measures such as a 1-meter wide vegetation buffer and a 2.4 meter high privacy fence. Plans may also need minor changes to address the comments emerging from the final review of the stormwater management and erosion control brief that was submitted. I think you've seen the property before, but here are some more recent site photos. Which I can speak to if you have any questions. The application appears to conform with the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and staff are recommending approval of the site plan application, subject to conditions to address outstanding matters noted in the report, and any requested revisions from the relevant review agencies. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Richard. And I'm seeing that in response to the applicant or their representative.
Just briefly, I think Richard has outlined the application well. Just a couple of points I wanted to bring to your attention. The concerns of the neighbors have been addressed.
I think you're supposed to come forward, John. I'm standing here and I'm seeing all of a sudden, a million hands, and I thought, oh, yeah, okay, yes, you're supposed to come forward.
Sorry, I forgot I was on camera there. So I think Richard has explained the application quite well. There are a couple points that I wanted to raise, that the concerns that were raised by the neighbors have been addressed. My clients met with them, provided them assurances and on the type of fencing and planting as well. During the course of the severance to deal with the reciprocal rights of way, the neighbor to the east provided some comments wanting some fencing adjacent to the parking over there, and that has been expanded in that area to provide parking for, or buffering for them as well. Brandon from Public Works has provided Brunel Road Management a dollar amount for the contribution towards the sidewalks out front as part, I think, of a construction project that'll be happening there. And my clients had no objection to that amount, and are pleased to include that in the site plan agreement. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to help you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for attending today and being here for questions. So, with that, I will read the motion. It has been moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Weeb. Be it resolved that the Director of Development Services approve site plan application SPA 43-2022, and that the agreement be prepared to the satisfaction of the town, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all other commenting agencies, and the conditions of provisional consent respecting consent applications B 21-2022 HT and B 2022 HT being fulfilled and finalized. Questions or comments with respect to this? Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Richard. Richard, it appears that I see 3 trees in the entire site plan here. Would those be existing trees or new plantings?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Those, I would believe, are existing trees, and we'll be talking to the applicant about additional plantings, if those are supposed to be the trees. Because I think there was expectation that there would be a row of trees, so that's what we'd be looking for.
Any other comments? As a follow-up to that kind of, Richard, I'm not seeing in my view where it's outlined the new building. I know we've approved the building, I understand that, but just how it actually relates to the area that we're eating up as far as the green space. I just wanted to be reminded of that. Is that, just the location.
So
It's not in the
through you, Madam
parking.
Chair.
Where the parking, that area stays the same at the parking, and then the other takes up the green space. And they're maintaining those trees?
So the parking is being formalized. Right now, it's a gravel
Right.
parking area.
Yeah.
And it's shown in some of the photos, and that's being formalized. And then the proposed 6-unit building is to the west of the parking.
Right.
And yeah, that's.
So it's basically right behind both of the other
Yeah,
buildings?
exactly.
Right, tucked in, okay. Okay, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. Okay, we are on to our final item of the day, and that is under previous business. We have one item. It is C 2022-02 regarding 46 Haynes Road and 18 Legacy Lane. And Richard, you're back.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, the subject properties are located at 46 Haynes Road and 18 Legacy Lane. On May 11th, 2022, Planning Committee passed Resolution DEV 58-22 to recommend to the District of Muskoka that phase condominium description application C 2022-02 be approved, respecting the initial phase, Phase 1, and Phase 2, conditional on the conditions of approval as listed in Attachment 1 to the report. After review of this recommendation, district staff indicated that they could not proceed with draft approval of the file until the town is satisfied to recommend conditional approval of the proposal in its entirety. As such, this matter has been referred back to the town and is before committee again for consideration. The proposal before committee is the same. As proposed, the Highcrest condominium development is for a 150-unit phase condominium development with 6 phases being registered sequentially as shown on the draft plan. And I won't go through this, but you'll recall that each one of the units has a certain number of, or each one of the phases has a certain number of units being developed. And within Phase 3 and Phase 4, there are 2 multi-residential buildings proposed. In considering this application last month, committee requested further details respecting the provision of functional outdoor amenity areas associated with the multiple residential buildings that were proposed in phases 3 and 4. And on further review, the developer has indicated that this amenity area could be provided on the rooftop of the parking structures for those buildings. And I will just point to it with my cursor. And that's planned, that rooftop exists because the parking structure is planned to be connected below grade. They've also suggested that additional areas could be provided within other areas of the development. And it's noted that the detailed design for the outdoor amenity area atop the parking structure could be or can be established to the satisfaction of the town of Huntsville within the landscape plans for the Phase 3 site plan agreement. The developer provided some images of what outdoor amenity area could look like in that location, and they also provided some samples of what other things they were considering. So things like benches along trails. I think this is a patio or pergola. And then this was the treatment that they were suggesting could go atop the rooftop. A condition of approval relating to this has been added to the previously recommended conditions of approval. As such, staff are recommending approval of the phase condominium application in its entirety, subject to the revised recommended conditions of approval that are listed in Attachment 1 to the report. And I think that's all I have. So I thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Richard. And I'm not sure if the applicant or their representative is here electronically. No one else is here, so I'll ask Jen if she could check.
As a reminder, if the applicant or their representative is present electronically, please use the raise hand button or press *9 to indicate that you would like to address committee. I don't see any hands raised, Chair Alcock.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, with that, we have potentially a couple of motions, but I'm going to read the first one as recommended by Richard, staff. Moved by Councillor Weave, seconded by Councillor Armour. Be it resolved that Planning Committee approve a motion to amend something previously adopted, which would amend motion Development 58-22 as adopted on May 11th, 2022 as follows. The line respecting the initial phase, Phase 1 and Phase 2, conditional on conditions of approval as listed in Attachment 1 to this report be deleted, and the following line be inserted, conditional on the revised recommended conditions of approval as listed in Attachment number 1 to this report. So this is ostensibly doing two things in one. It is asking committee to approve a previously adopted motion and to consider it at this meeting, but it's also including the change in one motion. Did I get that right? I did, apparently. Okay. So are there questions with respect to that? Councillor Stone.
I'm still confused.
Okay, normally, when we would do a reconsideration, we'd have one motion to say, can we reconsider? And then committee would say, yes, we can reconsider. And then we would have the motion to amend based on Richard's presentation today. Basically saying, we can go forward and approve all phases. Correct? I think the last time we had this before us in May, we said we'll let the developer go forward with phase 1, but we wanted to see more information with respect to the activity space, the recreational space. And since that time, there's been a lot of work between staff and the applicant on that, as was illustrated in the pictures, right? So what staff has nicely done with working with the clerk's department, rather than have 3 separate motions, they've combined 2 into 1, and so now we would just have 2. Is that okay? Your worship.
But this new motion takes into things like specifically point 8 on the agreement page of phase 3 only being granted after a landscape plan is provided and
I
everything,
think
right?
so, but I see Richard nodding. He
okay.
should answer that for sure. Yes?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair, that is correct. It would attach the new conditions.
Right. And so everything that we're looking at, the illustrations that are so very important to this development, are we now basically saying you need to follow through with this?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, the requirement would be that those be implemented through the landscape plan as part of phase 3, and the condition is to ensure that that would happen.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Stone.
I know some others went out to visit the applicant and take a look at the whole site. I did as well. I was wonderfully surprised and impressed. The quality, the vision that they have. I think this is going to be a great development, and I didn't know that before. So,
I too visited the site and had exactly the same thoughts, and I was really pleased with their ability to think creatively as to those outdoor spaces. So that was really important to me. Okay, last question here. I'm going to call the question on this motion I just read. All those in favor? And that carries, so, which means I then move to this one. And I have a motion. It has been moved by Councillor Armour, but I do need a seconder for this one. Okay, Councillor Stone. Be it resolved that Planning Committee recommend to the District of Muskoka that phase condominium description application C 2022-02 be approved, conditional on the revised recommended conditions of approval as listed in attachment 1 to this report, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign any necessary documentation related to phase condominium description application C 2022-02. Questions or comments? All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And well, I only have one more. And you have like a few minutes. You have a few minutes. I might, I should ask, since there is another section, and if there's any verbal update that you want to share, Richard, or not? Yes, you do. Okay. Goodbye, Your Worship. Goodbye. All right. This is under our last item under general information. Richard.
So through you, Madam Chair, this is an update on the community planning permit bylaw. The community planning permit bylaw is being finalized based on the comments on the second draft, some of which continue to come in. Mapping is also being revised as appropriate based on these comments. The bylaw with mapping will be brought back to committee in July, and this will not be a public meeting. But anyone who would like to speak to the item could do so by registering to make a deputation. If the committee is favorable with the bylaw, it would be brought forward for approval by council at the end of the month. So I believe the meeting would be July 25th. Staff will also be advancing a housekeeping amendment to our official plan to address bylaw implementation matters. And this amendment will require an open house and a public meeting, and those will be taking place in July. The official plan amendment would be brought forward for adoption at July's council meeting also. And that's all I have for you. And I thank you for listening, and if you have any other questions.
That's an important update. Are there questions? No? Okay. So July will be busy with our CPP and OPA and, okay. All right. CPP, OPA, I just like saying it. A, B, C, D. Okay. Oh, people want me to read the last motion, I can tell. Thank you, Richard. All right, and no other updates, I don't think, from my agenda. So with that, I will read the final motion. It has been moved by Councillor Stone and seconded by Councillor Wiebe. It is recommended that we do hereby adjourn at